Hi, I'm just going to fly with the seat of my pants this week. There was such an unfolding and the repeat theme, one way or another, leads to silence. So this week I'm going to name it Give Peace a Chance. Because at the end of the day, that's ultimately what each session desires to come to, a sense of peace within. But there are times when to get to that peace, we have to really get to some deep, serious stuff to see that. So at the beginning of the week, I pulled a card at the start of beginning this to see whether what that would read would be the overall theme. But it was the beginning of it, and pretty important, so I'm going to read it to you. It is risk, was the card that was pulled. Risk being yourself. Risk having fun. Risk loving, risk living. Life is full of risks. Nothing is guaranteed. Risks are easy when you trust yourself and flow. But do not take physical risks at this time. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Give a new idea a go. Take a chance. Take a chance on something new. Change your routine. Be different, although I would say be more yourself. Be that sense of becoming, and as it becomes, it feels different, but it's ultimately a further aspect of self revealed. So, to find what this is, especially if you're other orientated, because when things become still, the tendency for many is to then be focused on others and what might then lead to action via others. And the ability to actually sit in the silence, even if it becomes boring. And in the boring, an essence is felt that permeates everything. You can almost disappear in that and experience an expansion. So the silence can show the unknown self, which itself has no name and hasn't got any labels. So it's a very subtle place. People can meditate for years and maybe not find it, but it really is not that difficult if one is prepared to sit in silence at the point of boredom for that expansion to appear, and that's it. But we're so busy looking for something, interestingly enough. So there it flowed, that aspect of, which often shows when people are healing or doing a healing mode, it can be a particular way that you were taught, protocols or whatever it is. And when you're in the flow, it can take you from something that shows a way, but then flows to something else. And by sticking to the protocol, it can really jar. And it can even jar the physical because you're pulled between two different spaces. And the ability to trust the flow. It's a bit like going down a river on a canoe. And while you're canoeing a particular stretch, you're already focusing on what's around the corner. Well, when you get round the corner, you'll see and you'll continue the flow. And being present in that flow takes away a lot of anxiety rather than always focusing on what's around the bend. What then, what then, what then? And you know, flowing down that river, that moment by moment sequence, as soon as we're around the bend, what's left behind is then, it's in a sense we're moving, this is about a moving forward process. The past is dead to me. So, you know, to be in, there is no life if there's no death. In fact, if there's no death in the body with the cells all the time, we're in big trouble. Life and death, the in-breath, the out-breath, the heartbeat, the closing of the eyes and opening, these are all life and death moments moving forward. And when we can see it that way, we're more focused on forward than constantly feeling I can't move forward unless I clear all the past. There's so much past that pulls people back when really it's that forward moving of next. Part of that is a speaking. There are times to speak clearly the upset or what isn't working for you, so that something can be put to an end, which again also is a death, so that we can move forward to what the real intention is and not be stuck in the history of how it always is, how it goes, it's useless to even mention it, blah, blah, blah. So to put an end to things, to get clarity moving forward so that we can both be on the same page, which whether it's a financial relationship, an intimate relationship, there's great life in being clear and saying that's not on anymore, that's not what the agreement was. And to be able to move forward into life. It's all about forward moving. And in that forward moving, peace is found. So another way that this forward moving showed, which was kind of, had to sit in it a bit, because it came up as despair and hopelessness, like deep despair and hopelessness. And it was seen in a large life process, and it was also seen in more local processes. It came up twice. And this hopelessness and despair was quite profound, because many of us can see beyond our time here, and there are things that are going to take generations one way or another, but the seeds are being sown now. So words spoken now may not flourish into the next generations. Think of Plato and Socrates and the likes. You know, they wrote things down that we're still reading and getting great nourishment and insight and ponderings from. And to live in a way and to speak in a way and to produce things in such a way that if it's not heard now, to actually feel the hopelessness and despair and speak that which nourishes. But it's that hopelessness and despair that moves the energy to do things even though they may not be fully accomplished in this lifetime. And then there's more the local, where the hopelessness and despair moves one into action. And to move into action is to sometimes be part of a team. Now that team might be called an organisation, but an organisation sometimes has board meetings and BORED meetings, and it's about being organised to move forward, rather than just have repeat meetings that at the end of the day they're always inquiring but there's no action taking place. And to feel the despair and hopelessness motivates one to say, okay, what's the action this week? What can we move forward? And it takes hopelessness and despair to get very real with that. And there are many who have started huge processes in life from this hopelessness and despair to have found that it has serviced and helped so many because action was taken and the growth came from that teamwork that had as a basis that for a movement. It's like the saying, be cold, be hot, but don't be lukewarm. And it brings that action out, which is fantastic. So it's not hopelessness and despair, it can be a guide to action. So then there are those who are in action and are doing their very best with great capacities that they have. And I'll draw how that can sometimes feel. So if we have an activity that needs to be done at your workplace, at home, wherever it is, and if we find that midline, very often the capacity goes way beyond that midline, where the capacity is enormous, but that also takes a lot of time and a lot of energy to do that. And what was relevant in this circumstance, if you have somebody above you who continues to say, well, why are you not doing the lot? And then to begin with, the being itself doesn't want to admit that they can't do it all. And they feel guilty that they can't do it all. But it's not fair in the first place. So then to be able to look at it and to see that your capacity is beyond and naturally beyond, that then you can get realistic about what communication needs to go upline to say you need to give or something's going to give. So reading your own energetics in terms of how much you do and not think of the necessity to do it all. It's about give and take and being appreciated for the absolute wonderful skill that one has, although not necessarily recognised, not wanting to recognise it because driving them gives them so much value at their cost. So seeing it is a very important thing. And not feeling guilty, to really come to that knowing of, I am enough. I am enough. So another aspect of that capacity when in organisations is when someone above wants another to do something, because they're not going to do it themselves, and nor do they need to do it themselves, but they speak to those that they're asking to do things with an immensity of pressure to really stress how important it is that this needs to be done in this time frame and whatever. And then that pressure can be like a monkey on your back. But if you can go above and observe what's happening, you can actually see, oh, I'm capable of that. I can do that. And therefore not feel the pressure that they are expressing what they want done with, but rather your capacity, and that is possible. It takes the pressure off. And if it is too much and it's unreasonable to speak, I know I can do X, Y, Z in that time frame, but we'll see how far it goes, because you can only do what you can do. It's about taking the pressure off oneself, recognizing capacity, and being calm in your own capacity. And speaking it, yes, no problem, it's as good as done. for it will need a certain amount of time, but we'll see how we go. I'll get back to you. And take the pressure off oneself, especially those people who already go to the max of their capacity with ease and generosity. So another form of pressure that showed up was everything. Everything felt like a pressure and everything went into overwhelm. And a lot of these things are not in the individual's hands to do anything about. And that absolute peace one can find when you actually can just let it know and not give a proverbial. To really go out and give a proverbial. And just allow it to move on. Be it relationships, being choices that are made around you. A lot of these things aren't life and death. They're just individual upsets that can blow up to such an extent that when you have a few of them coming together, it can go into overwhelm rather than letting go and letting God, and actually finding that process of calmness and peace within. Because at the end of the day, if you look much further down the line, these things aren't worth the pressure that one puts oneself in. So to not give a proverbial was very relaxing and very calming. And then one can find oneself again and find that contentment of what that is. Because this particular being is extraordinarily generous, considerate, and very often they're the ones that feel the pressure, because that's not necessarily how others respond in the same generosity, with the same foresight, which actually showed up in another session where their capacity, immense, is asked, yet it can meet it. And in the lifetime had, it was done without a seeming effort. It doesn't mean an effort wasn't made, but in its capacity, it just continued to make it nothing. To such a point that making it nothing, it became unbearable that others couldn't see it. So then complaints came out about the activity, which then destroyed all the activity that was being put forward. Complaining when one does so much and it doesn't feel reciprocated or matched to begin with. Others can't really see how much one can do and make nothing to begin with, because it's an individual process. But to start complaining about it actually takes away that capacity that can make it nothing, and then destroys oneself and the others that one is complaining about. So to find again that capacity that one has, and in its silence and in its peace of knowing that these things can be met, calm can arrive. Now that flowed into a further aspect. And the flow-on aspect that showed up going further into the weekend was the stillness, the power and the depth of stillness, and the silence in which peace lives. So if we imagine the tornado, in the eye of the tornado, it's extraordinarily still. It's silent, it's still, no sound, no words. It's extraordinarily powerful. And the being that came in had a very strong aspect of this. And of course, out of that stillness, enormous activity can arrive. But what showed up was how can I communicate? How can I communicate this? How can I show it? And it was, how can I reveal this immensity of love that I feel? And the moment, and of course there are no words for it. It is such an isness of essence of being that is through all of us and everything. That because it was so deep, it would go into activity. It would go into activity. And in that activity, and not being able to stop that activity because the desire to express it just kept going into activity, because it didn't know that no matter what you do, there are no words for it. And although it was going into action, there is no action that can express it. And finding the calmness in understanding that there are no words is a very peaceful place. Which led to the final aspect that showed up in relation to this, what I call give peace a chance, was a being that sense of being that swims in the totality of it all, and through each of us finds an expression, finds an activity, and the more that it can come from that nothingness, the more profound it can often be. There's such a natural flow in that. But what had happened here is this being was literally stuck in, and I've come across this before, they were stuck in activity of feeling it was not enough and I have to be productive. But in extending itself in being productive, it's never enough. So then I have to be more productive and I have to be more productive. And by the time these rings go out, the connection to the essence of self is lost. And then doing more and more and being more confused about all the things that I'm doing, if anything, leading me into mind and confusion and not being able to work things out, instead of going back and realizing that we are enough. I mean, sitting in stillness, doing nothing, and that aspect of being at peace and content is so nourishing in the face of all that's going on. It's necessary that that takes place. And then the essence is seen as not so much my activity, more allowing a flow and an enjoyment of, and a movement and a meeting of self as one goes along, and in the choices that we make, and then turning another corner and making a choice, or even saying, well, I go back to another choice. They're all forward movements. And in that way, one finds and can reflect on self as a moving forward essence. We all have individual essences, and each has a particular sound that makes up the total orchestra of what is here. It's very important, and even just sitting and doing nothing contributes to it. You are enough. So the Australian bush essence that showed up, I love the name of this one, Dog Rose of the Wild Forces. And it says that this flower is found in Victoria, This essence was made up from a plant quivering and leaning over the surging white water just below Mackenzie's Fall. It's, don't know how to say this word, Garrywerd, G-A-R-I-W-E-R-D, previously known as the Grampians. This plant is commonly found growing close to the water, and like dog rose, it deals with fear. It is taken when a person has a fear of losing control, when the emotions they are feeling within themselves or immediately around them are just so intense there is a sense of losing total control. On a higher level, it helps to teach the necessity of gaining control over the emotions so that emotional intensity will not disturb one's natural energies. So the negative conditions are fear of losing control, hysteria, pain with no apparent cause. And the positive is calm and centered in times of inner and outer turmoil, emotional balance. So the card that was pulled at the end of the weekend, with all that revealing itself, was peace. Relax, slow down, meditate, be peaceful. You do not fix everything right now, this minute, but it might be the time to resolve your inner conflicts and create peace. Take time to be peacefully with yourself, without any external noise or the hustle-bustle of everyday life. Be gentle and peaceful in your communications. Do not force the issue, neither can you try to create peace. You must simply allow it. Much love.